last few years, the Model Y has defined the way we think of Tesla in Europe, establishing a template for a business-minded electric mid-sized hatch that the mainstream brands are only just getting to grips with. Just as they are, Musk's men have introduced this considerably upgraded Project Juniper design, with sleeker looks and a classier interior.
One of the things on Tesla's to-do list with this Model Y's Project Juniper update was to improve ride quality. That's something that, like others, we criticised about it back in our original test in 2022. Well, this enhanced design is still pretty firm, but it's no longer quite as unsettled over porous surfaces as the original car was. That earlier Y model's refinement also needed looking at. The original version was more afflicted with wind noise and tyre roar than it ought to have been. And again, some useful improvements have been made, primarily with new sound dampening materials and also with the introduction of acoustic glazing. Now, Tesla reckons that's reduced road noise by 22%, impact noise by 20%, and wind noise by 20% too. Subjectively though, the improvement doesn't feel quite as great as that. Journeying quietness still isn't anything like class leading, but it now does at least match the segment standard. Not all of the changes have worked. We weren't that enamoured with the original car's rather lifeless steering, and to try to improve that, Tesla has slowed the rack down from 2 to 2.4 turns lock to lock, but it still remains somewhat remote in feel and rather needlessly oversensitive. Whichever of the three provided helm settings you choose, you've got light, standard or heavy. The drivetrains are much as before, but the EV range figures that they generate are usefully enhanced, and that's primarily thanks to the improved aerodynamics. The base standard range version, which uses a 279 bhp rear-mounted motor, has a 63 kWh LFP battery. That takes you 311 miles between charges. Most will want the mid-level long-range rear-wheel drive variant though, which gets a gutsier 308 bhp rear axle motor to compensate for the larger 83 kWh NMC battery. That's capable of taking the car up to 387 miles between charges. The same larger battery also figures, of course, in the two dual motor derivatives. The long range all-wheel drive version we're trying here, that has a combined output of 375 bhp, and the top performance variant, the output of that hadn't yet been announced at the time of this review though. Obviously the extra weight of the dual motor format blunts range rather. For this long range all-wheel drive model, it's quoted at 364 miles. As before, all variants are quite rapid. Both the single motor versions make 60 miles an hour in about 5.5 seconds, a stat that this all-wheel drive model improves to 4.1 seconds on the way to the 125 miles an hour top speed all Model Ys share. These stats assume, of course, you select the faster of the two provided acceleration modes, Sport, the other one is Chill. Belatedly, Tesla has introduced two brake regeneration settings for our market. They're branded here as deceleration modes. As I said, there are only two, reduced and standard, and they have to be accessed via rather fiddly screen menus. They do work well via a brake-by-wire system, and they give good pedal feel. The other drive change you'll immediately notice here is that there's now no gear selection stalk. That functionality has been moved into the swipe option on the right hand side of the central screen here that you get with other Teslas. Initially you might find this a little bit awkward to use, I certainly did, but you'll get used to it, and the system automatically selects backwards and forwards motion when you're manoeuvring around at low speeds. That's jolly useful. This is a much more distinctive looking Model Y with an exterior redesign apparently conceived to maximize efficiency using every kilowatt hour more effectively. To that end, the drag coefficient is more slippery, improved from 0.23 CD to 0.22 CD, keeping this Tesla as one of the segment's sleekest cars. At first glance, there don't seem to be many changes here at the side, although actually body length has increased quite substantially by 39 millimeters to 4,790 mils. That's 70 millimeters longer than a Model 3. That's a needed increment given this Model Y has to be large enough to accommodate a third seating row in some markets. At the front, the first thing you'll notice is the new look nose, which references that on the company's avant-garde Cybertruck, hence the angular lines and the ultra-thin LED light setup. The rear is also different, now embellished with smoked tail lamps and a 1.6 metre full-width light bar. Inside, those familiar with the original car will notice the new steering wheel, now featuring customizable switches for quick access to frequently used vehicle functions. Just one redesigned stalk now protrudes from it, gear selection duties having been moved to the near end of the huge 15.4-inch central screen, also improved, although it looks very much the same. The company's alternative segment contender, that's the Model 3, that doesn't even have an indicator stalk, but this was retained for the Y because customers told Tesla, as we did, that they didn't like the wheel-mounted indicator buttons on the 3. What else? Well, these front seats have been redesigned and can now be ventilated, and as before, there's a choice of black or white interior finishes. This central console here is also new, covered in genuine aluminium and featuring sliding covers with precise smooth movement, which ease back to reveal both a cup holder and extra storage. And there's more too. The USB-C ports offer faster 65-watt charging. The Wi-Fi is now a massive 300% faster, and the vast glass roof, although it looks the same as before, is apparently all new too, reflecting more solar energy, and that better helps to keep the cabin cool when the sun shines. Plus blind spot indicators, they are now integrated into the front door tweeter area. Otherwise, the minimalist cabin is much as before. The physical switch has been kept to an absolute minimum, something that Tesla fans seem to like, but which we and others think is a bit of a potential safety hazard. As usual with the brand, don't even bother looking for a starter button, for a handbrake switch, or for physical ventilation controls. Even the vents actually themselves are pretty hard to see. Right, time to take a look in the back. Big improvement here in the rear is the addition of this added 8.4-inch touchscreen for climate functions and games, which can connect you through to YouTube and Netflix. But there are also a few improvements which are less obvious, like the way that the second row seats here now have a powered reclining function, and they offer enhanced comfort too and convenience with easier to access buckles, longer cushions and deeper bolsters. There is rear seat heating too. As before, legroom is generous, and taking a middle-seated adult is possible not only because of the completely flat floor here, but also because of the space provided for a central-seated passenger to slide his or her shoes forward beneath this jutting console with its twin vents. Now the powered tailgate here rises to reveal the same 890 litre cargo area as was offered before, which sounds a lot, but only because Tesla quotes capacities measured up to the roof rather than to the window line as other brands do. There is now a parcel shelf which wasn't provided on earlier Model Ys, and it's a good square usable space which is usefully improved by this versatile floor with its twin luggage boards and a deep well underneath them. A flexible 40-20-40 split is provided for the rear seat back, so longer items like skis can be slid in without disturbing a couple of rear-seated occupants. If you need more room, flattening the bench backrest is aided by little power buttons on the left for seat retraction. You don't get a completely flat load area as a result, but the 2,138 litre capacity freed up as a result should be ample for most owners. We'll finish with a look at the frunk, the fruit, or whatever you want to call it, up front here in the nose. It can't quite swallow suitcases like the one in the Model S can, but with a single motor variant, its 117 litre capacity is probably good for a couple of small squashy bags. With this dual motor model, that figure falls to 88 litres. A 10 to 80% DC charge takes about 30 minutes, but a full charge from empty might take several hours, depending on the station's charging speed. As for AC charging at home, Tesla reckons that from empty to full, an 11 kilowatt wall box would replenish both Model Y batteries in about 7.5 hours, but the 7.4 kilowatt wall box that most owners will probably have needs 11 hours 45 minutes. These days, of course, the Model Y has a far tougher task than it did at its original launch back in 2021. But this welcome package of Project Juniper updates has kept it fresh amongst much more recently launched rivals. There's a more premium look inside and out, and if you haven't tried this car for some time, you'll be impressed at the more recent improvements in driving range and refinement. Not everyone likes the stripped out cabin vibe though, so try before you buy. As ever though with this brand, the biggest ownership draw remains the brand's accessible supercharger network, something that no other marque can match. In short, although the competition is getting closer, you might still feel that there's nothing quite like this Tesla.